Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're handing you a decoder ring. Have you ever felt like the news you're reading, or a political speech, or even just a random ad is subtly nudging you to think in a very specific way? Well, you are absolutely right. In this explainer, we're diving into critical discourse analysis, or CDA. It's this incredibly powerful, systematic framework that lets us see the hidden structures of power operating in everyday language. And honestly, it's going to transform how you read and listen forever. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. 1. Decoding everyday language. 2. Power, ideology, and CGA. 3. Tools to analyze language. 4. CGA in the real world. And finally, 5. The limits of analysis. We're going to start with some theory, but don't worry, we'll quickly move into some mind-expanding, real-world applications.
Section 1. Decoding everyday language.
So here's the thing. As humans, we basically swim in this vast sea of language, but we rarely ever notice the water. To really understand discourse, we have to take what's completely familiar and make it feel strange. When linguists like Deborah Schifrin talk about discourse, they aren't just talking about abstract grammar rules or sentence diagrams. They mean language in use. It's a major shift from seeing language as the static object on a page to seeing it as a social action. Drawing on the philosopher J.L. Austin, the idea is that to say something is to do something. When we speak or write, we're actually performing actions. We're legitimizing authority, we're excluding groups, we're making requests. Language is active.
To really grasp this, scholar H.G. Whittleson makes a brilliant distinction. He separates text from discourse. The text is literally just the physical ink on the page, or, well, the sound waves in the air. That's it. But discourse, that's the dynamic process of meaning-making in a specific context. Think about it like this. The exact same text, say the words, "I need you to stop," creates a totally different discourse if it's spoken by a police officer versus a crying child versus a software pop-up window on your computer. Context is literally everything.
Section 2. Power, ideology, and CDA. So how does this active meaning-making actually connect to social inequality? Well, that is the critical discourse analysis. And we absolutely can't talk about this without introducing the philosopher Michel Foucault. Foucault basically provides our philosophical why. He argued that what counts as truth in any given society isn't just discovered, it's actively produced through discourse. Foucault taught us that there is no knowledge outside of power. Dominant discourses, whether we're talking about medicine, law, or the media, literally produce what is even thinkable or sayable in a specific historical era. Foucault's own words carry immense weight here. Quote, "In every society, the production of discourse is at once controlled, selected, organized, and redistributed by a certain number of procedures whose role is to ward off its powers and dangers." Basically, language isn't just a free-for-all. It's deeply controlled by societal structures, exactly because language holds the power to shape reality itself. Which brings us to Antonio Gramsci's concept of hegemony. Gramsci observed that modern ruling groups rarely maintain dominance through physical force or violence. Instead, they win consent. They make their specific self-serving worldview appear to the masses as universal common sense. Norman Faircloth, who is one of the founders of CDA, connects this directly to language. He says discourse is the primary battleground where this hegemony is established. It's where power is naturalized until it just feels like, well, that's just the way things are. Section 3. Tools to analyze language. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we transition from heavy theory into a practical toolkit. So how do we actually spot this hegemony in the grammar we read every single morning? Our first analytical tool is transitivity. Derived from Halliday and Fowler, it treats every single clause as a representation of a process in the world. As an analyst, you're constantly asking, what type of process is happening here? Who acts and who is acted upon? But most importantly, who has agency? Let's look at this with a clinical, forensic eye. Take two headlines describing the exact same event. The active voice reads, "Police shoot unarmed man in city center." Here, the police are the clear agents committing a material action. But consider the passive voice headline, "Man killed in police operation." By just shifting the grammar, the agent, the shooter, is entirely deleted from the sentence. The event is constructed radically differently. It's an instant aha moment, showing exactly how grammar shields institutions from responsibility. Next up is nominalization. And honestly, this is one of the most powerful ideological tools in the English language. Nominalization is the grammatical process of converting active verbs into static nouns. By turning an action into a thing, it completely removes agency. It erases the representation of an event as an ongoing process and effectively hides responsibility.
Let's look at exactly how it works. In the agentive form, soldiers tortured prisoners. It's direct, right? The human actors are totally visible. Now compare that to the nominalized form. The torture of prisoners occurred. The verb tortured has magically become the noun torture, and this brilliantly illustrates a double layer of agency removal. The human actors, the soldiers, are entirely hidden behind an abstract institutional noun, making the violent action seem to just spontaneously occur without anyone actually doing it.
We also absolutely have to look at conceptual metaphor. Let's objectively dissect how lexical choices in immigration discourse frame our entire understanding of a really complex issue. If the media describes immigration as a flood or says a country is being swamped, it dehumanizes people. It implies a natural disaster that requires containment. Now, if they're described as arrivals or asylum seekers, the language is neutral, humanizing, and rights-based. But if they're framed as invaders or illegals, it switches to a military framing, constructing migration as a criminal attack. These aren't just decorative words. These actual mechanics of language dictate public policy.
Section 4, CDA in the real world. Okay, so you have the toolkit. Thanks for sticking with the theory. Now let's put it to work on some high-stakes examples. To do this systematically, we use Norman Fairclough's three-dimensional model. Step 1 is analyzing the text itself. That's the grammar we just learned. Step 2 is discursive practice, looking at exactly who produced this text and for what audience. And finally, step 3 is social practice, zooming way out to see the broader historical context and power relations at play. It's a tangible method you can literally use on the media you consume every day.
A massive part of that social practice is how groups define themselves against others. This brings us to Toon Van Dyke's ideology square. It shows how groups systematically frame us versus them to justify power. It's actually remarkably simple. A group will systematically emphasize their own good actions while de-emphasizing their own negative actions. Conversely, they'll emphasize the outgroup's negative actions while actively de-emphasizing any of the outgroup's positive traits. Applying this toolkit neutrally to political discourse from the early 2000s demonstrates how deeply ideological stances were encoded as unquestionable facts. The phrase war on terror framed a tactic, terrorism, as if it were a physical enemy state, which legitimized a military response. The axis of evil metaphorically equated modern targets with WWI Axis powers to justify preemptive action. Calling the exact same group freedom fighters versus terrorists encodes political bias as objective reality, and passive casualty reports, like civilians were killed, erase the military agent entirely from the historical record. But hey, this isn't just about politics, it's about commerce too. Think about the famous L'Oreal ad slogan, "Because you're worth it." This relies on a concept called interpolation. It directly hails you, the viewer. By using the dialectic word you, it constructs your identity. And look at the presupposition here. By stating, "because you're worth it," the text assumes you might harbor some pre-existing self-doubt. It sneakily links your personal self-worth and self-respect to the commercial consumption of their product. Clever, right? Section 5, the limits of analysis. Let's move to and see how this builds our understanding. As rigorous as CDA is, we have to take a reflexive look at its critiques. The major pushback comes from scholars like H.G. Whittleson, who formulated the selectivity critique. The argument here is that analysts might subconsciously select texts and highlight grammatical features that merely confirm their predetermined political positions. Whittleson argues that texts underdetermine meaning, meaning a single text can sustain multiple interpretations, so CDA really risks falling into circular reasoning. As Whittleson sharply puts it, the analyst selects from the text those features which support a predetermined interpretation. The analysis is a demonstration rather than a discovery. It's a vital warning that all analysis is inherently selective. However, CDA scholars counter this by arguing that explicitly acknowledging their political commitments and biases upfront is actually much more intellectually honest than pretending to have some false objective neutrality. The absolutely crucial limitation to remember here is to avoid determinism. Despite the incredible power of dominant discourse, rest assured, you have agency. Audiences are not passive receptacles or deterministic robots. People actively reinterpret, mock, and subvert dominant messages every single day. Language doesn't just dominate. Through counter-discourse, language can empower, liberate, and transform society. You are an active media consumer. Which leaves us with the ultimate tension at the heart of critical discourse analysis. As you navigate the news, the ads, and the political speeches of your daily life with your brand new decoder ring, I leave you to ponder this. Does discourse control our reality, or do we control the discourse?